If you're ready to take your destiny into your own hands, you've come to the right place. This is The Bulletproof Entrepreneur, featuring interviews with the most exciting and amazing entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Chi Odogu.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you hear on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur podcast at www.odogwu.com. And without further ado, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I have a phenomenal guest on the line today. I'm talking to John Asher. John is the co-founder and CEO of Asher Strategies. It's a high-level sales advisory services company that advises startups and Fortune 500 companies on their sales and their sales processes. Prior to starting Asher Strategies, John worked as a captain of a nuclear submarine, as well as co-founded an engineering services company that grew 42% on a compounded annual growth rate for 14 consecutive years. These days, in addition to leading Asher Strategies, he's a foremost keynote speaker, thought leader, and advisor to several companies. Some of the companies he advises include the private equity division of Goldman Sachs and Indian River Advisors, as well as several other Fortune 500 companies in the United States, Canada, China, and in many other countries around the globe. So I'm pleased to have John on the show today to tell us a little bit about himself, his background, his business, his experiences, as well as his new book, Close Deals Faster. So John, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great. So John, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. How did you become a sales master, so to speak?
Well, you know, my first job was, my first career was in the Navy, and I was the captain of 2 nuclear subs, and then I went to the Pentagon for 5 years, where I was a program manager of a large Navy program. And you've got 3 jobs. 1, you're the program manager. 2, you're the buyer, so you put out RFPs and companies bid on them, and you pick one to build your program. Mm-hmm. But then 3, you're totally 100% a salesperson. You got to keep your program sold. You got to justify your program. You're in competition with all the other program managers from all services. You got to build relationships within the Navy and the Department of Defense, and you got to go over the Hill and build relationships with the staffers on the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. So you're totally a salesperson also. That's where I first learned to sell, in the Pentagon. I know it sounds funny, but where I first got it.
Yeah, because you wouldn't actually expect for people in the Pentagon to be salespeople and closers. You'd expect them to be thinking of, high-level military strategy and tactics and just doing things that were, in that field and that space, so to speak.
Exactly, and there's a big operational part of the Navy, Pentagon. And then there's a whole acquisition part of the Navy and every service, really, where they're in charge of buying new equipment, upgrading old equipment, and that sort of thing. That's where I was in my last job.
Interesting. So when you transitioned from working in the Pentagon into the engineering services company, did you found that company, or were you hired in to lead the sales team?
Actually, I'm an engineer. And based on my experience in the Pentagon, I built a lot of relationships. So the day I retired, 2 other Navy engineers and I started an engineering company. I mean, frankly, just selling back to our friends in the Navy.
Oh, okay.
And it was during the Reagan buildup years. So, money was everywhere for defense.
Wow.
And so it was really pretty easy. And, so we sold to the Navy, the Army, Air Force. It was easy to branch out to selling to the big aerospace and defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so we grew it really fast, and then we got up to about 165 million, and a big company wanted it, so we kind of rather suddenly sold it. Oh. And then I retired, and after about 2 weeks, I failed retirement. And my wife essentially kicked me out of the house and said, "Will you please find something to do?"
That is funny. So, what did you end up finding to occupy your time and to get out of your wife's business?
Well, I volunteered to be an executive coach, and the guy who was really in charge of that program said, you'd be much better off trying to teach people how to sell based on what you did in your career rather than coaching people. I don't think you've got the patience to do that. He was exactly right. And so based on, having taught everybody in our company, about 2,000 engineers how to sell over 14 years, we pretty much had a program on how to do it. So I just went out and started selling with another partner, selling to the big companies. And so, for example, today we're still the corporate trainers for Lockheed Martin, having started that 20 years ago.
Wow, interesting. And it's funny, I think I read somewhere that you said everyone can actually learn to sell. That when you go into train companies, you actually try to train as many people, because whether they are either client facing or not, one way or another, they may actually interact with a client or maybe presented with a sales opportunity unexpectedly. And if they're not trained, then that's a lost opportunity.
Totally agree, and everybody says it. Charles Schwab's been saying it for years. The late great Zig Ziglar essentially said, no sales, no company. And Dan Pink, in one of his recent books, To Sell is Human, he said, based on his analysis, 1 in 9 of us, professional people in the U.S., has sales in our title: VP of sales, sales director, sales manager, sales rep, and that sort of thing. But he said, the way the world works now in an internet-based global economy, the other 8 of the 9 of us, we're in sales also. We're selling ourselves. We're selling our ideas. We're selling to the boss. The boss is selling to us. We're selling to the bank to get more capital. The banks are selling to us to get our business. So we're all in sales.
Yeah. Interesting. So now you mentioned something here, and I made a note of it because I want to find out from you. So you said it's different between being a coach and then being a trainer and teacher of sales. Could you break that down for us?
So to give you a good example, we have 3 things we really do as a company. We assess people for aptitude for sales, see how much talent they've got to be in sales, and then help them learn to stretch. We do sales training. And we do sales and marketing advisory services, which usually means help people improve their sales and marketing processes. And we also do sales coaching. But the right spot for me is to train salespeople and help them improve their processes. And we got 3 senior women, and their main job in the company is sales coaching.
Okay.
That's their sweet spot. That's what they love to do. I don't particularly want to do it, frankly. I'd much rather come in and beat the skills into salespeople for a day than leave. And the sales coaches, they want to stick with them after that, and coach them for months.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Nice. So, like I mentioned earlier, the show is actually targeted to people who are either early stage of their career or transitioning into an entrepreneurial business. And with most people that are starting a new entrepreneurial venture, I think the biggest thing before they can actually say they're a business owner or an entrepreneur, so to speak, is to get their first client. So could you teach us basically how to land the first few clients so that we can start our businesses, forgetting everything else that people tend to do when they want to start a business?
Well, let's start with the basics on how to start a business. Just big picture.
Sure.
Having started 5 of them myself, there's really 3 functions for any business. Somebody has to get the clients. Somebody has to execute. Once you get a job, do the job brilliantly so you can keep on getting more business and get new clients. And then somebody has to handle all the back office stuff: admin, contracts, HR, etc. And so there's a real myth that one person can start a company and do it well. That's a real exception. So when you're starting a company, it's almost always best to have at least 2 or 3 people.
Okay.
Bill Gates didn't start Microsoft by himself, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
Right? So that's one fundamental thing. It's always good if you've got a team of 2 or 3 people to start, because somebody has to do those 3 functions. And what happens classically, you get a really smart person, starts a company, they get a customer, they got to execute now, and somebody also has to review the contract, so you get all bogged down in that stuff, and then the whole thing just doesn't go anywhere. That's one kind of principle of starting up.
Yeah.
Then the second thing, of course, is most of us can figure out how to do contracts and HR and that sort of thing, and most of us can execute. We can, do stuff. But it's much more difficult. The hard part is getting customers.
Yep.
And so when you peel back the onion and say, well, what does it take to be a good salesperson, somebody good at business development? There are 5 factors that explain success in sales. The first is product knowledge. So it's kind of obvious, I hope, to everybody. If you're going to be good in sales, you better know what you're talking about. And then I would say half of the global industries now, buyers, especially higher level buyers, would much rather talk to a subject matter expert with deep technical knowledge than to a salesperson who's got shallow technical knowledge, who the buyer knows is just really trying to sell them something.
Wow.
So product knowledge is not only important, but it's actually increasingly important because of the way the world's going so technical. Second factor is natural talent or personality and how it fits for sales. Third factor is selling skills, learning the skills, like my book, Close Deals Faster. There are essentially 8 basic skills that are needed to be good in sales. The fourth factor is motivation. Are they charged up and motivated and want to sell? And then the fifth factor is the sales and marketing processes that the company has to support the salesperson. And so when you see all 5 of those factors in alignment, that's when you'll see the great salespeople. Now, of the 5 factors, I'll just give you a couple of examples. Product knowledge is almost binary. In other words, if you've got a lot of product knowledge, you have a chance to make a sale if the other 4 factors are in alignment.
Okay.
But if it's pretty obvious to the buyer that you don't know what you're talking about, there's almost no hope of making a sale.
So you must become an expert in the product.
Exactly. So product knowledge almost binary. You must have it, or it's pretty damn hard to sell something. The second is called sales aptitude, or our personality and how it fits for sales. And based on a meta-analysis, in other words, a summary of a whole lot of studies, just aptitude accounts for 50% of sales results. The other 4 factors, the other 50%.
Okay.
So aptitude is everything, but it's pretty important.
Okay, so you just said aptitude is everything. Now, when you talk about personality, are we talking about introvertedness versus extrovertedness? What exactly are we talking about there?
Well, there's 8 personality traits.
Okay.
So if you go take a personality assessment or one of these detailed ones that gives you a lot of information, then you'll have a number of personality traits, and they're all independent. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
One is called intensity, drive, goal orientation. So I hope it's obvious for a salesperson that needs to be high.
Yeah.
Right? You want people who are just driven to make quota. Second would be assertiveness. So you want salespeople to have a high degree of assertiveness, so when it is time to propose the close to the buyer, they've got the gumption to do it. They're not timid, in other words. So the opposite of being assertive is being too timid. Another one is called social drive. And you'd like to have salespeople that talk to people in the elevators, people that like to go to trade shows, like to make new friends, build relationships. So you get the idea. So you just march down these traits.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious which ones you want to be high for a salesperson, which ones you want to be low, and which ones you want to be moderate. I'll give you an example of one that you'd like it to be low. You do not want salespeople to be highly detail-oriented. And I hope it's kind of obvious. You don't want them all bogged down in analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
You want them to stay with the big picture with the customer. Now, if you have to get down to details, bring in a sales engineer if you need to.
Okay. So wait, hold on a second here, John, because you mentioned earlier that you must have thorough product knowledge for you to even be anywhere close to the sale. And now you're saying you don't want to be too detailed and too technical. Are they mutually exclusive? Because I would think they kind of go hand in hand.
They don't go hand in hand, and here's why.
Okay.
The trait of detail orientation means if my detail orientation is low, it means that for me to make a decision, I don't need a lot of data. I'm going to go by the gut.
Yeah.
If you are highly detail oriented, you would need a lot of data to make a decision.
Gotcha.
So it's all about how much data do you need to make a decision. It doesn't mean that you can't be technical.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm very technical. I'm a nuclear engineer.
Yeah.
But I'm also have a low detail orientation. Maybe that's why I never made it as an engineer.
I got you. I get the difference now. Great.
So here's one where you want it to be moderate, and that is the ability to build rapport. So, in other words, the need to serve other people. So you'd like a salesperson to be moderate in that trait. In other words, if you're the buyer and I'm the seller, I need to be able to build rapport with you so you'll feel comfortable with me. But if I was really high in that trait, I'd want to build rapport all day and never get down to talking business. So that's a trait where you want it to be moderate.
Yeah.
So 8 of the 8 basic traits, about half you want to be high, a couple moderate, and a couple low. And we know this from, as I say, a meta-analysis of literally hundreds of studies by the big sales and HR institutes. What's the personality you want to see for success in sales? The third factor is selling skills. And to give you a couple of examples, we all know the listening skill is important.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of 3 known ways to be the perfect listener. And then in the closing skill, another one of the key skills, there are 6 closing principles. And almost none of the salespeople I've ever met know all 6, know the data behind them, and know the neuroscience behind them. In other words, why do they work? What's the neuroscience principle behind that closing principle, and the data behind them? What happens if you don't, if you screw them up? Fourth factor is all about motivation.
Yeah. Is
the salesperson, at that time of life, are they charged up to make sales? Do they have is it a single mom who has 2 kids to put through college? And we kind of know she's going to be working 16 hours a day to make that happen.
Yeah.
Or is it somebody who's, baby boomer on the way, kind of out of the workforce, who's kind of comfortable with the sales they've got? So they're really not motivated to get more sales. So motivation is, all over the map. But you want somebody who is charged up and self-motivated. Then the 5th factor is sales and marketing processes for the company that supports the salesperson. And I'll give you one classic example. If I was your sales manager and you were a salesperson working with me, and you had 5 major accounts that you were managing, and you also had as a goal this year to bring in 3 new accounts. So you're half account manager and half hunter salesperson. You got to manage the 5 you got, and you got to bring in 3 new ones. Well, if at the end of the year you were working 100% of the time on managing those accounts, and you never got a chance to lift a finger about getting a new account, whose fault was it? It's obviously my fault.
Yeah.
Because I should have gotten you an admin assistant who could have freed you up from a lot of the detailed support work for those 5 customers. So that's 5th factor, real important. Does the company have processes to support the sales? And of course, another obvious one now is, it used to be that marketing would give salespeople leads and be upset because the salespeople didn't follow up, and then the salespeople, of course, would say, "Well, these leads aren't worth a damn." But now with marketing automation, predictive analytics, big data, CRM, all that sort of thing, marketing really today is able to deliver qualified leads to salespeople.
Yes.
And so if the company does that, that's great. If they don't, well, that's not so good. So those are the 5 factors: product knowledge, natural talent based on their personality, selling skills that they've learned, charged up and motivated, and the company has these great processes to support them. All that in alignment, that's when you'll see the top 5% of the salespeople. And right now, there's about 25 million salespeople in the U.S.
Wow. That's a lot.
Top 5, got all that.
That's a lot. Great. So now, when we talk about, I know in your new book, Close Deals Faster, I beg your pardon, Close Deals Faster, you put the subtitle, The 15 Shortcuts of the Asher Sales Method. So could you walk us through those 15 shortcuts that you actually use to train companies around the globe to help them improve their sales?
So fundamentally, most of them are based on this
we just spoke of.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
So fundamentally, over the last, I'd say, 3 to 5 years, there's been an explosion of new studies by neuroscientists all around the world, and now they've been in a big forum sharing information globally. And in many cases, what they're all about is human communications and decision making. And of course, the decision making research they're doing applies directly to buyers and how buyers make decisions. And so many of these studies, Harvard, for example, the buyer is fitted with what's called a functional MRI machine. Think of an MRI helmet. So the buyer's wearing a helmet with a little MRI machine inside. And so now we know exactly where decisions come from, what areas of the brain, how we can wake up the buyer's whole brain. So to give you just a quick history of this, about 500 million years ago, the reptilian brain came on the scene. It's the fight, flight, fright, appease brain. It controls all of our autonomic functions like breathing and heart rate. Then, 350 million years later, that is 150 million years ago, when the vertebrates came on the scene, like a mammal, when the mammals came on the scene, like a whale, the emotional brain was developed. And it's all about feelings and taking pictures and later comparing new pictures it sees with pattern matching of what's stored in the emotional part of the brain. Then 2 to 3 million years ago, with the advent of primates, including us humans, the rational brain came on the scene. And the rational brain is all about facts, figures, complex thinking, and that sort of thing. And to simplify it, neuroscientists will group the reptilian and the emotional brain, since they're both over 150 million years old. They'll group them together and call them the old brain, and call the rational brain, because it's only 2 or 3 billion years old, they call it the new brain.
Yeah.
So where are decisions made?
In the old brain.
So you're right. So you may have heard something like this. We decide on emotion and justify with logic.
Yep.
Right? Most of us have heard some version of that statement. When you ask people, what does it mean? People have trouble trying to figure out what it means. So let me give you a real simple example for your listeners. Your company and 2 other companies are competing for business with a medium-sized company. And all 3 companies have, they're in the startup mode, but still they got some pretty good experience, good service, good quality, reasonable prices. So in the buyer's mind, all 3 companies are kind of tied for first. So which one does the buyer choose? Well, we all kind of know, based on emotion, the buyer chooses the salesperson they like the best, the one that's built the best rapport, the one they have the best feeling about. Now, the other side of this is, the rational part is, your company and two other companies are bidding for an opportunity. Your company and one other are tied for first in the buyer's mind. Great experience, service quality, reasonable prices. And the third company is really kind of an average company. So even though the buyer might like the salesperson from the average company the best, feel the best about them, have built the best rapport with them, the buyer is not going to choose them because they don't have the logic to justify the emotional decision.
Mm.
That's a very simple example to explain what it means to say we decide on emotion and justify.
Yeah.
Now, with that background, we know from these functional MRI studies, these MRI helmets, where all kind of tactics are tried on buyers and we can see what parts of the brain light up. We know there are 6 main stimuli that will wake up the buyer's whole brain. So if you're a salesperson and you're dealing with a buyer for the first time and you do not wake up the buyer's old brain with any of those 6 stimuli, closing rates are pretty much 0.
Mm.
We now know about those 6 stimuli, and there's also about 40 cognitive biases, which means a tendency or a bias or a shortcut or a rule of thumb, that impacts sales as well. So now, when you watch the elite salespeople who've got all 5 factors, understand these 6 stimuli and the 40 heuristics or cognitive biases, now we're talking about the top 2% of the salespeople who, title of my book, can close deals faster.
Yeah.
They know how to wake up the buyer's old brain with the 6 stimuli, and they know how to use these cognitive biases. That forms the kind of the underlying basis for the 15 shortcut.
Okay. And is there a role of storytelling in the framework?
So the 6th stimuli is called customer stories.
Okay.
And so I'm sure you've heard this statement that the best salespeople are the best storytellers.
Yes. And storytelling has been on the rise lately, so that's why I asked.
Yes. So it's actually the 6th of the 6 stimuli to wake up the buyer's whole brain.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best, and we now know, from an excitement, engagement, emotional standpoint, telling a story will go right to the buyer's whole brain. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we started working for a mechanical contractor in the area, D.C. area. Walt, the sales manager, told me that sales had been stagnant for about 3 years. So we started by giving all 21 salespeople an aptitude assessment to see who was high, moderate, and low for natural talent for sales. And since all of the salespeople came up through the company, in other words, they weren't hired as a salesperson. They were just a customer service rep, a field technician, or a sheet metal bender. Then there was pretty much a bell curve. A few had a high talent for sales, a few had low, and most were moderate. So over the next 9 months, we helped Walt restructure the sales force. So in the end, 9 people had a high aptitude for sales, 7 people had a moderate aptitude for sales, and they actually had 5 less salespeople. The results were sales went up by 30%. They had 5 less salespeople. And since costs went way down, gross margins went up by 70%. So now, as the buyer is listening to that, their old brain pretty soon feels like it's in the story.
Yeah.
And at the end of the story, the buyer's old brain's going, wow, I wonder if I can get those same results.
Whoa.
We now know from these latest Harvard functional MRI studies that there is an architecture, the perfect architecture for a story. And as I just told you that story about Walt, I followed that perfect architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the answer to your question, that was a long-winded answer to your question, but...
So now, going down this path, you train lots of big companies And I also mentioned that you're an advisor to Goldman Sachs Private Equity as well as Indiana Advisors, I believe. So
In Indian River, Indian River, and
oh,
also Headwaters.
Headwaters, exactly. So when you work with these three big, savvy financial companies, what are some of the things you train them on? Do you train the bankers or the deal makers in terms of how to do deals, or do you help them with their portfolio companies to help drive up growth so that they can get bigger valuations and exit the companies properly? And so
Yeah, really three things. One is, as you suggested, train all of their senior BD people on these 5 factors. And then secondly, when they're about to buy a company, most of these financial companies are very good at evaluating operations, evaluating finance, and they're not so hot at evaluating sales and marketing. Our other role is to take an acquisition candidate that they've got and go into the company for a couple of days and assess all 15 of their sales and marketing processes.
Okay.
And just give a red, a stoplight chart, red, yellow, green. And so if we go back to Headwaters and say, almost all of these processes are red, well, then Headwaters is not going to buy that company.
Mm-hmm.
If they're all green, then at least that's a check. If they're mainly yellow, they'll say, well, can you guys help us fix this? And we'll usually say yes.
Yeah.
If they say, well, how long will it take? If we say 2 years, well, they're not going to buy it either because they want to, as you know, they want to flip it in 3 to 5 years. Typically.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the third area we get involved is once they bought the company, going in and training the salespeople in the company, in their portfolio company.
Oh.
Those are 3 areas where we get involved.
Nice. I love it. So, John, as we start to wind down the show, I want to ask you a couple wrapping up questions because we've delved a lot into the principles of the book and your background. But now looking forward, and especially for the listeners of the show that are still trying to figure out this entrepreneurial journey. So, looking back on your career, what were some of the toughest calls you've had to make in your business and professional life?
Well, before I really learned about the aptitude assessments, I really did hire some knuckleheads. And so once I read, the book Good to Great, and which is all about get the right people on the right seat on the bus based on natural talent.
Mm-hmm.
And then started doing that, life got a lot easier. And when you listen to some of these great HR, gurus who've been around for a long time, they have these mantras for HR and hiring people. I'll give you a couple of them. One is hire slowly and fire quickly. And when you think about it, that's kind of obvious advice, right? Take your time to get the right person.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they don't work out, then cut it fast. And human nature is to do the opposite. So we hire quick. Most companies hire quickly to fill a slot, and then if it doesn't work out, they hope things are going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Another HR guru, his overall mantra is spend more time hiring and therefore much less time managing.
Mm.
So in other words, if you get the right person on the right seat on the bus who's perfectly suited for that role, they'll love the role because their strengths are needed for that role.
Yeah.
And they'll be happy, and the people around will be happy, and the boss will be happy. And so once I figured that out, must be 30 years ago, that made a huge difference. So get the right people on the right seat on the bus based on natural talent. That's one of that made a huge difference in my life.
Hmm.
As an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And for people that are considering a career in sales, I know we've talked a lot about the principles of sales, old brain, new brain, but what would you suggest they start doing to start learning the basics of just how to even prepare themselves for a career in sales? Because I know career in sales mean you probably need to be on the road all the time, probably need to be, prospecting a great deal and trying to close sales based on your prospecting schedule. So, what can someone that's either fed up with what they're doing now and thinking, okay, maybe I might have the natural aptitude for sales, but I've never done it before. What can I start doing to prepare myself to get into the sales game?
Well, without patting myself on the back too much, if you look at my newest book, Close Deals Faster, that contains all of the skills you need to be successful. And there's a discount code in the book to take a sales aptitude assessment.
Okay.
Which will tell you, are you best suited to be a hunter, a farmer, a sales manager, customer support, or is sales just not the right spot for you? Because again, to start a company, you've got three main functions, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to bring in the business, sales. Somebody's got to execute, and somebody's got to handle all that other stuff, all the admin, the HR, contracts. And so the dream is start a company where those three people are all perfectly suited for that seat that they're on. Then you got a real chance for success.
Nice. And my final question for the day before I let you go is, looking back on your career thus far, is there anything, if you could go back in time to change something, is there anything you think you'd want to go back and change?
Let's see. I've had such great careers. Wow. I've had three major careers. All of them have just been terrific, and all of them were right for the time in life where I was. If you're in the Navy, you got to be a young guy to be in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be willing to take risks, and that sort of stuff. So, what would I change? Gosh. I mean, you can talk about all the mistakes I've made, but
okay, so let's reframe it. Let's talk about the mistakes, and then let's talk about navigating the career and transitioning from role to role to role. How would you advise someone to think about that going forward? Because you've already had three careers, and chances are in this lifetime, each and every one of us will have more than one career. What we start out with after coming out of college is probably not going to be where we end up. So talk about your mistakes, and then talk about navigating the transitionary stages in life that will move you from one career to the next.
Well, the great thing about mistakes is you learn. So the late great Zig Ziglar used to say, I either earn, meaning close the deal, or learn, why I didn't get the deal. And then, change whatever I need to change to get the next deal. So most people who are very successful actually fail a lot, but they don't view it as I failed. They view it as, okay, I tried that, it didn't work. Well, why not? And then, try again. Remember Thomas Edison, how many different element combinations he used to get the light bulb to work? I forget. It's like, 1,100 times he tried?
Yeah, over 1,000.
Incredible. Yeah, incredible number. So don't think of mistakes as you failed. Think about it as, okay, I learned. And of course, you got to have that attitude to learn, and then move on, right? Move on. And then as you think about transitioning, I think it's all about learning. For my whole career, I really do read a book a week.
Yeah.
And for me, it's either a sales book, a business book, or a health, nutrition, and fitness book. Those are kind of my three areas. I don't read much for pleasure. Okay. I just read to learn. And so I think that gives you the basis for figuring out where you're going to go next, just by continuous reading and learning.
Oh. Interesting. And would you say you've had any mentors that have guided you outside of your books?
Well, I can give you, I've had some great mentors, and I'll give you one book that I read. I think it's the best business book ever. It's short, and it's a story, so it's like a 2-hour read, and it's called The Go-Giver. And the subtitle is The 5 Laws of Stratospheric Success. So, and that means for us, the individual. And I read it, must be 20 years ago, and about the time I was starting the sales advisory services company.
Yeah.
And that kind of that changed my thinking. I think that's the best business book I've ever read. As I said, it's short, 2-hour read, reads like a story, so very easy to read, and extremely well written, and just lifetime lessons from it.
Cool. I'll link to that in the show notes. Well, John, we've reached almost the top of the hour since we started talking. I know it feels like it's just been 5 minutes.
Yeah, it went by fast, didn't it?
Yeah. So I really want to thank you for coming to share your story, your words of wisdom, and of course the knowledge and learnings you've shared in the book. So please tell us before you go, where can we find the book Close Deals Faster, and how can people reach you if they want to connect with you?
Well, you can buy it on Amazon. In fact, it was published, the published date was October 24th, and it sold out on Amazon in 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Wow.
That was pretty impressive.
That's hot.
Now, I don't know, maybe they only had 3 books, I don't know.
You're being modest.
So that's where you can get the book. And, of course, go to the website if you want, www.asherstrategies.com.
Okay.
And you can also find that aptitude assessment I was talking about on the website as well. But in the book, there's a big discount for it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I see the aptitude assessments on the homepage of the website here. And I'll link to everything you just shared in the show notes. So, John, I really want to thank you for coming on the show to share your words of wisdom. It's really been a pleasure connecting with you to do this podcast.
Thank you. And by your reputation, I appreciate all the giving back you're doing.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to help.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the show today. If you love what you heard on today's episode of the podcast, go to iTunes and leave a review and a comment. It helps other great listeners like yourself find the show. And of course, you can always find more episodes of the Bulletproof Entrepreneur Podcast at www.odogwu.com.